Problems and resources are two ways we encounter life. Problems is something that we have to go through, something we struggle with, and sometimes we find it very difficult. Sometimes we just want to give up because problems can create a lot of doubts, a lot of anxieties, a lot of fears, a lot of anger. Resources, on the other hand, kind of help us to find a way out throughout our problems. So today the scriptures kind of help us to identify what are your problems, what are my problems, what are our problems. Some problems can be internal and other problems can be external. Internal problems has to do with health, our own struggles, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. An external problem could be family members, family crisis, society crisis, community crisis. And this year we witness it all in every part of our journey. The pandemic become a national and global crisis in all of us. So we'll look at Matthew chapter 14 in the miracles of the multiplications of the loaves and of the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. They created a real problems in this crisis where the disciples said to Jesus, what are we going to do? Let's send them home because we can't feed more than 5,000 people. So these are 5,000 men only, not including women and children. So the normal reactions when we face problems is to disperse the problem so we don't have to worry about it. Push the problem to somebody else. It's not mine to take care of. So part of Matthew chapter 14 then help us to see both forward-looking and backward-looking. The forward-looking has to do in Jesus taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and blessed as he said here. Looking up to heaven, he set the blessings, broke the loaves, and gave them to the disciples, who in turn gave them to the crowds. So forward-looking here is truly pointing to what we are celebrating today, the gift of Holy Eucharist. That at this banquet, Jesus breaks bread with us. We come to share our life with him and his life with us. That's the forward-looking in this miracle stories. The forward-looking also in Matthew's gospel is looking at the final banquet that you and I longing and thirsting for, to reunite it with Jesus Christ, to reunite with our Lord in heaven. And so every Eucharist then becomes that foretaste of the heavenly banquet that is to come. So look backward looking in the miracle stories in the Old Testament then. The miracle feeding of his chosen people, wandering in the desert for 40 years, the manna that God gives to his people, become the great stories that God continue to be faithful and support them wherever they are, even if they are dying of thirst in the desert, even if they complain and yell to God in many ways. But also backward looking, we also see the prophet Elisha come to feed his 100 people that followed him in listening to him and allowing his teaching to fulfill to every part of that part of his life in Elisha. So then problem truly arises in our lives. And again, the ultimate problem here in Matthew's gospel has to do with the disciples, which is very different in Mark's gospel. They don't know what's going on and know what to do, but here the disciples know what's going on. They know what to do. They know who Jesus is. The only thing that Matthew trying to focus is their lack of faith. And so sometimes we are too, in our own problems, we know what to do. We know what the necessary step may be, but our lack of faith will not give us that courage to push forward to overcome our own problems. So then Paul asked the questions, what will separate us from the love of Christ? He gave us the 7 cosmic powers and allowing us to see, are these 7 cosmic powers strong enough to push you and separate you from the love of Christ? And so he said here, anguish, distress, persecution, famine, nakedness, peril, or the swords. These cosmic powers can influence us. But biblical scholars, as they read and reread into the text of Paul, they suggest that we need to reframe the questions. It's not what will separate us from the love of Christ, but it's the other way around. What will separate the love of Christ from us? What will separate the love of Christ from us? So it's not about you doing that reject God's love for you, but it's an affirmation in Paul's teachings that the love of Christ will not separate from you, regardless of what you do or do not do in your life. So in the midst of problems, maybe the problem is inwardly, it has a lot to do with you. The love of Christ will not abandon you, will not let you go and disown you for whatever reason that you may have committed in your life. So that way of thinking shift in a big way. And so that's why Paul says here, in answering that question, for I am convinced death, life, angels, principalities, present things, future things, powers, height, depth, or any other creatures can separate the love of God in Christ from all of us. So he moved from the 7 cosmic powers to the realities of human life, that God will always remain loving and caring for each one of us. And so Paul then looked at the cross. The cross can become a problem for many people. But what is it that we can learn from the cross and to understand that God will not separate his love from all of us? So the cross of Christ has 2 symbols here. The first is the obedience of Jesus, embracing God's will in his life. Through his obedience, he helped us to see that in moments of problems, we can overcome situations. Somehow we need to be patient, be obedient to what God's will is. And second has to do with God, redemption. God's redemptive act is to raise Jesus from the dead into life. And so through the cross then we see that God redeems each one of us from our own sinfulness. God's salvation is granted upon all of us, believers and non-believers. And so now we move forward into the second areas, as I said in the beginning. Problem is there, so where do we go and operate and find solutions to our problem? That is resources. What are resources available to you that you can help yourself, avail yourself in this moment in your life? I remember when I worked as a production manager for 5 or 8 years. One of the hardest in production is the problem is there is how to make produce products, and what are the resources, the limited resources that you may have, I may have. For me, first is money. Finances is big. Money can create a lot of problems, but can also be a solution to problems. So we need money to buy and to do whatever we needed to do. And in this moment of that pandemic, some of you are struggling, where your job is being furloughed and maybe you're out of a job soon. And that can create a bigger problems. Second, in resources is material. Buying materials in the manufacturing firm is never easy because they always have the term, you rob Peter to pay Paul. You move money around. You pay suppliers and you don't pay them so you can buy materials. So in production, we always struggle with that. The same thing is with family. Maybe food, clothing. Thanks be to God, many of us do have to struggle with that. But other part of the world, people are struggling. How do I bring food to my table? How do I bring clothing to my children? Especially the upschooling is going to happen soon. Some are social distance learning, some are not. But it's real. The third would be people. In problems, sometimes people are the cause of problems. Sometimes people can empower people, or sometimes can create problems, or they become very creative, help you to find solutions. So who are the people that you need to engage in that they are resourcing for you, they become resourceful for you as well? And who are the people that create the problems? How do we work with them, help them to cope with their own problems? And the fourth is time. Time is so crucial. In productions, sometimes you only have 24 hours. Sometimes you have only 40 hours to do a certain shipment and to finish what you needed to do. And so let us look at these 4 resources: money, materials, people, and time. But I want to move to another context in this whole areas of relationship, in the context of problems. How do we engage to find healing and promoting a better and healthy relationship? So Dr. Melanie Greenberg, who is a psychologist, professor, a researcher, wrote on many books on mindfulness. She identified 4 areas. How to identify problems in relationship. And if these 4 red flags in the ways he said, if we don't work on them, they can create a bigger problem in the future. So the first 4 are these: lack of trust, 2, blaming and fixing, 3, criticism and put downs, and 4th, emotional distance. So I will focus just on the 2 today, so that we can kind of learn through in this real problems of people in relationship. First is the lack of trust. So Dr. Greenberg look at this 4 areas, and so the first thing she talked about in the lack of trust, she said, inability to trust our partners may take many forms. Feeling that they are being dishonest or hiding something from us. Not trusting them to be reliable, consistent, and available when we need them. Fearing they may take advantage of us or not trusting their values as human beings. Or not feeling safe to express who we are in our relationship. So she said, then why do we do it? People may get married because they see something desirable in their partner that they don't have in themselves, already because of common values. So over time, when one or both partners may grow in confidence or their needs may change, making them less willing to put up with the differences in their values. So jealousy can also create a lack of trust, she said. Jealousy has its basis on personal insecurity and fear of abandonment. We try to control our partners so they won't find ourselves better and leave us. The other factor, she said, people who have been abused as children or hurt in previous relationships may find it particularly difficult to trust and let themselves to be open in a way that is positive, in a way that is healthy. So native communication cycles and erode feelings and trust and healthy relationship. So she said here, consequences when there is lack of trust that not being focused on, talked upon. It becomes, it may lead us to behave in a way that alienations or anger toward others. When we are inadvertently pushed away other people, we are not able to receive a genuine love in our life. So then she said, what then should we do? Determine what you think in lack of trust. Whether it's due to the way your partner, your spouse, your loved ones has acted in the past, or your own issues, or both. How much are you able to trust yourself? If you can't trust yourself, what gets in the way? Insecurity, an unhealed wound, an addiction problem, depressions, or something else. So if there are specific things your partner has done to erode your trust, it is important to begin talking about these in a non-blaming way. If necessary, decide what behaviors are unacceptable to you and set reasonable limits with your partner. The second area is he said then blaming and fixing, and this is real when we face problems in our lives. So that when we blame, we are attributing responsibility to some bad outcomes to our partners. This behavior pattern may also include thinking we have a better way of doing things, or what we know how they need to change and try to fix them. So why do we do it? We do it because we want to be in control. That lack of control eats up in all of us. And so the lack of control also makes many people feel unsafe. Blaming, trying to fix our partner, are always trying to have more control over important outcomes in our lives. And also when something goes wrong, the brain automatically blames someone else. Not me, but other people. And so we don't take ownership of what we call accountability. And so she said the consequences when we have that tendency to blame and to fix it, So he said, blaming interaction can lead to what couples researcher Sue Johnson called a demon dialogues. Negative communication cycles in which people get stuck trying to be right, and in which the real underlying needs for connections, safety, or influence don't get addressed. So what is it that we need to do instead? Take a good hard look at your own actions and assumptions and how they may have intentionally or unwittingly contribute to the problems. Take full responsibility for your own contributions, be they miscommunications, unrealistic expectations, letting anger leak out, or being unsupportive. So when we use this conflict resolution of blame and fixing, he said further, if you feel your partner action hurt you in some way, communicate this gently using I statement, speaking about your own feelings and needs that were not met, rather than what your partner should have done. Make your request, not demands. And so I want to conclude part of her reflection with this quotations from Carolyn McCall. She said, if you can see yourself more than just a victim, now you have got the place to move into what is much more vital and creative and is resourceful than being a victim. Again, we go back to being resourceful, or finding the resources in our life that help us to overcome the problems. I invite you now to please stand.